The saddest thing about being the backbone of your family is not that they depend on you. It is that they start believing they own you. My name is Claire, and for years I was the person holding my family together with my own money, my own time, and my own life. I paid the bills. I covered the rent. I bought the groceries. I fixed the car. I helped with the medical bills. I said yes when I was tired. I said yes when I was hurting. I said yes even when I was the one who needed help. And for a long time, I thought that was love. I thought that was what a good daughter, a good sister, a good person was supposed to do. But the day I stopped helping, the same people who called me strong called me selfish. The same people who smiled at me when I brought money started mocking me behind my back. And the truth they had been hiding for years finally came out. This is the story of how my family used my kindness, laughed at my pain, and then exposed themselves the moment I said no. I still remember how it all began. I was 24 when I got my first real job after college. It was not glamorous. It was not the kind of job people post about online. But to me, it felt like freedom. I had grown up in a house where every dollar mattered. My mom, Evelyn, was always stretched thin. My dad was never really around in the way a father should be. He worked when he wanted to work and disappeared when things got hard. My younger brother, Tyler, was the kind of person who always had an excuse. My younger sister, Mia, had the sweetest face and the sharpest tongue. And then there was me, Claire, the oldest, the one who was always told, "You're the responsible one." At first, I wore that like a badge of honor. When I started making money, I told myself I would help for a little while, just until my mom got back on her feet, just until Tyler found steady work, just until Mia finished school. That was the lie I told myself. Because once you become the one who pays, people stop seeing your help as a gift. They start seeing it as a right. Every month, my paycheck came and disappeared. A chunk for the electric bill, a chunk for groceries, a chunk for the phone bill, another chunk for the mortgage. Sometimes gas money, sometimes school fees, sometimes medicine. Sometimes I would look at my own bank account and realize I had worked 60 hours a week just to stay broke while everyone else in my family lived like my stress was invisible. I did not complain. I thought complaining would make me sound bitter, so I kept going. When my mother needed surgery, I paid for part of it. When Tyler got behind on rent, I covered him. When Mia wanted a new laptop for college, I bought it. When my car broke down, I took the bus for 3 months so I could still help everyone else. I skipped vacations. I skipped dinners out. I skipped buying myself clothes. I skipped everything. And when I came home tired, with bags under my eyes and pressure in my chest, my family did not say, "Claire, are you okay?" They said, "Did you bring anything?" That question became normal. Did you bring anything? Not, "How was your day?" Not, "Are you exhausted?" Not, "Do you need help?" Just, "Did you bring anything?" And I smiled. Every time, I smiled. Because I wanted to believe that if I kept giving, one day they would appreciate me. One day they would see me. One day they would love me in a way that felt real. But the truth was, they only loved what I provided. I learned that one night when I came home early from work after a terrible headache. My plan was simple. I wanted to lie down for an hour, maybe drink some tea, maybe just breathe. But when I opened the front door, I heard laughing from the kitchen. I stopped, not because I was curious, because something in their voices felt cruel. I set my keys down quietly and walked closer. My brother Tyler was laughing so hard he had to hold on to the table. My sister Mia was saying, "I'm telling you, Claire is so easy to fool. All you have to do is look tired and she gives in." My mother said, "Well, she likes being needed." Then Tyler said, "No, she likes acting like a hero. She wants us all to think she's some saint." And Mia laughed and said, "She's not a saint. She's just scared to be alone. I felt like the floor disappeared under me. I stood there in the hallway, silent, while the people I had been sacrificing for made me the punchline of their joke. My own family. I heard my mother say, "Don't be too hard on her. She's doing what she thinks older sisters are supposed to do." Tyler added, "Yeah, until she gets a little attitude. Then she'll remind us how much she pays." They all laughed again. And I do mean laughed. Not one of them sounded guilty. Not one of them sounded ashamed. They sounded comfortable. That was the worst part. I backed away before they saw me. I went to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the wall for almost an hour. I did not cry right away. At first, I just felt numb. Then I felt angry. Then I felt stupid. Because suddenly, I saw it all clearly. The fake gratitude. The sweet words when they needed money. The cold shoulders when I asked for respect. The way they spoke to me like I was useful, not loved. But still, even after hearing that conversation, I did not stop helping. That is the part that embarrasses me now. I kept going. Because I had been trained to believe that family comes first no matter what. Because I had been taught that walking away makes you cruel. Because deep down, I was afraid that if I stopped giving, there would be nothing left of my place in that house. So I stayed. And things only got worse. The more I gave, the less they appreciated me. If I was late sending money, my mother acted offended. If I said I was saving for myself, Tyler rolled his eyes. If I refused to cover someone else's bill, Mia called me cold. They began talking about me like I was a machine. Useful, reliable, available, never human. Then one day, everything changed. I had been working nonstop for months. My job had become more demanding, and I was starting to feel the pressure in a way I could no longer ignore. My doctor told me I needed rest. My body was exhausted. My sleep was bad. My anxiety was getting worse. For the first time in years, I thought about myself. Just for a moment. I looked at my account. I had enough to pay the bills for one more month and still keep a little for myself. Not much, just enough to breathe. So I made a decision. I told my family I could not keep covering everything the way I had been. I said I needed to slow down. I said I needed to save for my own future. I said I would help where I could, but I could not carry all of it anymore. I expected disappointment. I expected silence. What I did not expect was the way they looked at me. My mother stared at me like I had betrayed her. Tyler snorted like I was joking. Mia crossed her arms and said, "So after everything we've done for you, this is how you act?" I almost laughed. Everything they had done for me? I was the one paying the mortgage. I was the one covering the lights. I was the one feeding the house. But in that moment, reality was not important to them. Only control was. My mother said, "You think because you make a little money now, that you can turn your back on your own family?" Tyler said, "You're acting like we're strangers." Mia said, "Honestly, Claire, this is gross. Ungrateful is the only word for it. Ungrateful. That word, they used it like a weapon. And just like that, the story changed. In their version, I was no longer the daughter who had paid bills for years. I was no longer the sister who had sacrificed her 20s. I was no longer the person who had kept them from losing the house. I was now the selfish one. The one who forgot where she came from. The one who cared more about money than family. The one who had supposedly been changed by success. That night, I went to bed with a strange feeling in my chest. Not sadness, not anger, something quieter, something stronger. It was the feeling of finally understanding the truth. They had not been loving me. They had been using me. And once I saw that, I could never unsee it. The next month, I stopped sending money. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I did not scream. I did not slam doors. I just stopped. and the reaction was immediate. My mother called first. At first, she was sweet. "Claire, honey, the electric bill is due." Then, when I did not respond right away, she called again. This time her voice changed. "Claire, don't do this. You know we need your help." Then Tyler texted me. "Seriously? You're really doing this now?" Mia sent me a message that said, "I hope this makes you feel powerful." I stared at those messages for a long time. Not because I was confused, because I was done. I did not answer. Then came the guilt. My mother told relatives I was abandoning them. Tyler complained that I had turned rich and selfish. Mia told people I had become arrogant since getting my job. They painted me like a villain because it was easier than admitting the truth. And for a while, the house started to fall apart. The bills piled up. The groceries got smaller. The late notices came in the mail. The comfortable life they had built on my sacrifice started to crack. That was when the mask really came off. Because when the money stopped, so did the fake sweetness. Tyler started shouting more. Mia started blaming everyone. My mother became bitter and dramatic. They fought over everything. Who forgot to pay what? Who spent what? Who was supposed to do what? And in those arguments, things came out that I had never heard before. Things they had been hiding. My mother had been telling everyone she was managing the house alone. Even though I had been paying a huge part of it, Tyler had not been using the money for rent the way he claimed. Mia had been bragging to her friends that I was basically their family sponsor. And the worst part? They had all acted like I would never leave. They had been so confident in my loyalty that they got careless. The lie started unraveling. One evening, my aunt called me. She sounded confused. "Claire," she said, "your mother told me you were refusing to help, but she also said you had never really been paying that much. I don't understand." I closed my eyes. Of course she had lied. She had minimized everything I did because if people knew the truth, they would ask questions. And once people started asking questions, the whole picture changed. A few days later, I got the final confirmation. My aunt had visited the house and overheard my mother telling a neighbor that I was too proud to remember who raised her. That sentence almost made me laugh. Because the truth was, I had been the one raising the whole house. But that was not even the part that hurt the most. What hurt was realizing how many years I had spent trying to earn respect from people who had already decided I was only valuable when I was paying. So I did something I had never done before. I started telling the truth. Not with yelling. Not with revenge. With facts. I saved the receipts. I gathered the bank records. I pulled up the transfers. I listed every bill I had paid. I listed every loan I had covered. I listed every emergency I had handled. I did not do it to humiliate them. I did it because I was tired of being called ungrateful by people who had lived off my gratitude for years. Then I sent everything to my family in one message. No long speech. No screaming. Just proof. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. My mother did not answer right away. Tyler called once, then twice, then stopped. Mia tried to text me a paragraph about how I was tearing the family apart. But when I finally replied, I said only this: "I did not tear anything apart. I stopped holding together what you kept breaking." After that, everything began to collapse in a way they could no longer hide. The overdue bills became real. The missed payments showed up. The people they had lied to began asking questions. And because they had spent so long trying to make me look selfish, they were not prepared for what happened next. Their little story fell apart. My aunt found out my mother had been pretending the house situation was fine. A family friend learned that Tyler had borrowed money and never repaid it. Mia's friends heard from someone else that she had been boasting about how I would always cover for them. And suddenly, the family that mocked me for being too much was being exposed for being not enough. Not enough honesty. Not enough responsibility. Not enough gratitude. Not enough character. When the truth came out, they tried to backpedal. My mother called and cried. Tyler sent a long text saying he never meant it like that. Mia claimed she was only joking. Only joking. That was their favorite excuse. They called cruelty a joke when they were caught. They called disrespect a misunderstanding when they were exposed. They called manipulation family tension when they wanted forgiveness without accountability. But I was no longer the same girl who sat in the hallway listening to them laugh about me. I was not crying for their approval anymore. I was not chasing their praise anymore. I was not paying for my own humiliation anymore. So I told them no. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just clearly. No more money. No more covering for you. No more pretending this never happened. And that was the moment everything truly changed. Because when I stopped being useful, they finally had to face who they were without me. And they did not like what they saw. For a while, they tried to punish me with silence. Then they tried to punish me with guilt. Then they tried to punish me by telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned them. But life has a way of showing people the truth when they keep lying long enough. The house they had treated like a prize became a burden. The spending habits they had hidden became obvious. The laziness, the excuses, the entitlement, the mockery, none of it could stay buried forever. And me? I built a life that did not require me to beg for respect. I moved into my own place. Small at first. Quiet. Peaceful. No screaming. No guilt trips. No one asking me what I brought home. Just me. My keys on the counter. My shoes by the door. My own bills. My own space. My own breath. It felt strange at first. Then it felt like healing. I remember sitting on my couch one night with a cup of tea, looking around my little apartment, and realizing something that almost made me cry. I was no longer living in survival mode. I was living, and that is when I understood the biggest truth of all. Family is not supposed to be the place where you are mocked for giving too much. Family is not supposed to be the place where your pain becomes entertainment. Family is not supposed to depend on your sacrifice and then insult you for it. Love does not humiliate the person holding everything together. Love does not call you ungrateful for finally choosing yourself. Love does not require you to disappear so others can stay comfortable. I still think about that old house sometimes. Not with hate, with clarity. Because the people inside it taught me something I will never forget. Sometimes the moment you stop paying is the moment the truth starts talking. And when the truth started talking in my family, it said everything they tried to hide. It said they were never grateful. It said they were never fair. It said they had mistaken my kindness for weakness. It said they had built their comfort on my silence. But most of all, it said this: I was never the problem. I was the proof. The proof that they could survive only because I allowed it. The proof that their image was bigger than their integrity. The proof that some families do not fall apart because someone leaves. They fall apart because the person they used has finally had enough. So yes, I stopped helping. And yes, the family was exposed. Not because I wanted revenge. Because truth does not stay hidden forever when the money runs out. And once the truth came out, I never looked back. My name is Claire. Months passed after that, and for the first time in my adult life, my days were quiet. Not empty, quiet. There is a difference. Empty is when you are alone and hurting and waiting for a phone call that never comes. Quiet is when your life is finally your own. I started sleeping through the night. I started eating at normal hours. I stopped checking my phone with that old panic in my chest. I stopped feeling guilty every time I bought myself something small, like coffee or a new shirt or a lamp for my living room. Those little things felt almost rebellious at first. That is how badly I had been trained. I had been made to believe that every good thing in my life had to be earned twice. Once by working for it, and again by apologizing for it. But now I was learning a different way to live. I was learning that peace does not have to feel guilty. Still, even after everything that happened, my family did not disappear from my life overnight. People like that never do. They circle back. They always do. First, it was my mother. She left me a voicemail one Sunday morning, and her voice was softer than I had heard it in years. "Claire, I know things have been hard," she said. "We all made mistakes. We are family. Please call me back." I listened to the message twice. Then I set the phone down, because I knew what came next. Not responsibility, not accountability, just the same old pattern. A soft tone to bring me back in. A little guilt, a little sadness, a little reminder that I was expected to return to my old role like nothing had happened. A few days later, Tyler showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole and my stomach tightened for a second, but I did not open the door right away. He knocked again. "Claire, come on," he said. "We need to talk." I opened the door only a little. He looked different, tired, less confident, less smug. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He shoved his hands into his pockets and said, "Mom's under a lot of stress. The bills are piling up. You made your point." I looked at him and said, "I did not make a point. I made a boundary." He sighed like I was the difficult one. That old expression, that old tone. Like my pain was inconvenient to him. He said, "You don't understand what this is doing to the family." And I answered, "No, Tyler. You never understood what it was doing to me." He was quiet then, because there it was, the truth. The one sentence they never wanted to hear. What it was doing to me. Not what it did to their comfort. Not what it did to their image. Not what it did to their plans. What it did to me. He tried to speak again, but I held up my hand. "I heard you," I said. "I heard all of you. I heard the jokes, I heard the mockery, I heard the way you talked about me when you thought I was just another piece of furniture in that house. So do not stand here now and act shocked that I finally heard enough." His face changed. Not anger. Something worse. Embarrassment. Because I think that was the first time he realized I had not been blind. I had just been patient. And patience is not the same thing as weakness. He left after that. No apology. No promise to change. Just silence. That silence told me more than any speech could have. Because deep down he was still waiting for me to give in. He was still hoping my kindness would come back before his responsibility did. But it never did. Then came the family gathering. That was the moment everything finally broke open in front of everyone. It was my cousin's birthday, and my aunt had invited a lot of relatives. I almost did not go, but my aunt had been one of the few people who never tried to use me, and I wanted to see her. I told myself I would stay only for an hour. Just enough time to be polite. Just enough time to keep peace. I walked in quietly, and people greeted me warmly at first. Too warmly. That should have warned me, because when people are too cheerful all of a sudden, it usually means they want something. I was holding a drink when I saw my mother across the room. She smiled at me. Not a real smile, a careful one. The kind people wear when they are about to perform. I should have left then, but I stayed. And that was when she stood up in front of everyone and said, "Claire, maybe now that you've had your little break, you can finally stop acting like we're strangers." The room went still. I felt every eye turned toward me. My stomach dropped. My mother continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We are your family. We raised you, we supported you, and now you are punishing us over a little disagreement. A little disagreement. That is what she called years of being used. That is what she called the cruelty. That is what she called the lies. Before I could answer, Tyler added, "She likes making us look bad. She always has." Mia, sitting near the cake table, rolled her eyes and said, "Claire has always been dramatic when she does not get her way." And suddenly I understood. This was not an accident. They had planned this. They wanted to corner me in public. They wanted to make me look unstable. They wanted me to apologize in front of witnesses so they could feel powerful again. My aunt looked uncomfortable. My cousin stopped smiling. A few relatives exchanged glances, and I just stood there. My heart was beating hard, but my voice stayed calm. I said, "You want to talk about what really happened?" My mother lifted her chin like she was ready for a performance. I nodded once. Then I turned to the room and said, "For years, I paid the mortgage. I paid the electric bill. I paid for groceries, medicine, repairs, school costs, and emergencies. When they laughed behind my back, I kept helping. When they called me ungrateful, I kept helping. When they acted like I owed them my life, I kept helping." The room was so quiet I could hear the ice in someone's glass clink. I looked at my mother. "You told people I never did enough," I said. "But you were spending money I earned while telling everyone you were doing it alone." Then I looked at Tyler. "You borrowed money and lied about it." Then Mia, "You mocked me for paying your way through the life you wanted." No one interrupted me. No one could, because I was not yelling. I was not crying. I was not begging. I was simply telling the truth, and truth has a way of making liars uncomfortable. My mother tried to speak, but I kept going. "I am not here to fight," I said. "I am here so everyone understands why I stopped helping. I did not abandon this family. I stepped out of a system where love was only respected when it came with money." That sentence changed everything. I saw it on people's faces. Relief, shock, disbelief. And then, slowly, understanding. Because almost everyone in that room had known a version of this family dynamic. Maybe not my exact story, but enough of it. Enough to recognize it. My aunt was the first one to speak. She said softly, "Is that true?" My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out at first. Then she said, "She's exaggerating," but her voice shook. And when a liar starts shaking, the whole room notices. My aunt turned to her and said, "Evelyn, is it true that Claire has been paying most of the household expenses?" My mother looked around the room. For the first time in her life, there was no way to control the answer. Tyler stepped forward and muttered, "It is not that simple." That was all it took. Not that simple. The favorite phrase of people who cannot defend what they have done. And in that one moment, everything they had tried to bury came up again. The lies, the mocking, the entitlement, the years of taking me for granted. My cousin looked at me like he did not know what to say. Someone in the back whispered, "Wow." That sound hit harder than any insult, because it was not pity. It was realization, and realization is dangerous. My mother's face changed then. She knew she was losing control, so she did what people like her always do. She tried to turn the story into a tragedy about herself. Her eyes filled with tears. "Claire, I'm your mother," she said. "How can you humiliate me like this?" I stared at her for a long second. Then I said, "You humiliated yourself the day you laughed at the daughter who was keeping your lights on." No one spoke after that. Not for a while. It was like the whole room had been holding its breath. Then my aunt stood up and said something I will never forget. "She does not owe you a lifetime of sacrifice just because she loved you." My mother looked stunned. Tyler looked angry. Mia looked down at her hands. And in that moment, I saw the truth clearly. They had never expected anyone to stand beside me. They had counted on me being the quiet one, the one who swallowed everything, the one who protected the family image no matter what it cost her. But people can only be silent for so long before silence becomes a kind of surrender. And I was done surrendering. I set my glass down carefully. Then I said, I hope you all get the help you need. I really do, but it will not be from me anymore. And I walked out. My hands were shaking when I reached my car. I sat there for a few minutes before starting the engine. Not because I regretted it, because I was finally feeling the full weight of telling the truth out loud. It is exhausting to carry a family's lies for years. It is even more exhausting to drop them. But when I drove home that night, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Light, not happiness exactly. Not yet. Just light. The weeks after that were strange. People called me, some to ask questions, some to apologize, some to say they had had no idea. And I believed some of them. Not all, but some, because the truth had not only exposed my family, it had exposed how many people had been too polite to ask what was really happening. As for my mother, Tyler, and Mia, they lost the story they had been telling. Not all at once, but enough. Enough that the cracks showed. Enough that they could no longer pretend I had just become selfish overnight. Enough that the people they had been manipulating began to step back. And once the free support disappeared, the structure they had built on top of my life could not survive. That is the thing about a foundation made of one person's sacrifice. It looks strong until that person stops standing there. One night, months later, my mother called again. This time I answered, not because I was ready to help, because I was ready to listen. She sounded smaller than I had ever heard her. Claire, she said, I made mistakes. I stayed quiet. She swallowed. Then she said something I did not expect. Your father should have done more. I should have done more. And we let you carry too much. For a moment, I could not speak. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. Not because the pain was gone. It was not. But because at last, the truth was being spoken without a joke, without a defense, without an excuse. I took a slow breath. Then I said, I needed to hear that years ago. She started crying. I did not. Not because I was cold, because I was tired. There is a kind of tired that goes deeper than anger. It is the tiredness of carrying old wounds until you no longer know where they begin. I told her, I forgive you for what I can forgive, but forgiveness does not mean I go back to being used. She was silent. Then she said, I know. That was the closest we ever came to honesty. Not perfect, not beautiful, just honest. And sometimes that is enough to begin. But my life was no longer waiting on their beginning. I had already started mine. I changed jobs a few months later for better pay and less stress. I started therapy. I learned how to say no without explaining myself to death. I learned how to leave the room when people turned my kindness into a demand. I learned how to stop feeling guilty for not rescuing adults who refused to rescue themselves. And I learned something else too. You do not have to hate your family to stop letting them hurt you. You do not have to scream to be strong. You do not have to destroy everything to protect yourself. Sometimes strength looks like a quiet door closing. Sometimes it looks like choosing your own life after years of serving someone else's. Sometimes it looks like a girl named Claire sitting alone in her own apartment, in the stillness she once thought she would never deserve, finally understanding that peace is not selfish. It is survival. And that was the truth my family could not handle. Because once I stopped giving, they lost more than my money. They lost the version of me that made their lives easy. They lost the person who protected them from consequences. They lost the girl who kept shrinking so they could stay comfortable. And that loss exposed everything. So when people ask me now what happened to my family, I tell them this: nothing happened all at once. That is the part people never understand. Families like mine do not explode in 1 second. They rot slowly, in silence, in disrespect, in little jokes. The hardest part of leaving a toxic family is not the leaving. It is what comes after. Because after the shouting stops, after the bills are no longer yours to carry, after the guilt messages fade, you are left with something unfamiliar: your own life. And at first, your own life can feel strange. Too quiet, too open, too honest. I thought the peace would feel easy once I got it. It did not. It felt unfamiliar enough to scare me. For years, every part of me had been trained to react to someone else's emergency. My phone buzzed, and I jumped. A text came in, and I braced myself. A family name appeared on the screen, and my chest tightened before I even read it. That kind of fear does not vanish just because you decide to be strong. It has to be unlearned. So I spent those months unlearning. I learned how to wake up without dread. I learned how to buy things without checking whether someone else needed my money more. I learned how to sit with silence without feeling guilty for not fixing everyone's problems. But even while I was healing, my family kept trying. They did not stop because they respected me. They stopped only when they realized I was no longer easy to control. And people like that do not like losing control. My mother tried a new approach after the apology call. She started sending small messages. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional enough to call manipulation. Just little lines. Hope you are well. Thinking about you. Family misses you. At first, I did not reply. Then she sent, "Can we talk sometime?" I stared at the screen for a long time, because by then I knew the difference between a real apology and a setup. A real apology takes responsibility. A setup tries to reopen a door before anything has changed. So I answered one message. Just one. I am open to a conversation when it is honest. That was all. No fight. No lecture. No argument. And the next thing she sent told me everything. She wrote, "We all did what we had to do." There it was. The old language. The old excuse. We all did what we had to do. People say that when they want forgiveness without accountability. People say that when they know they are wrong but still want to feel justified. I did not answer. Tyler, on the other hand, became more direct. He was the kind of person who could never sit with discomfort for long. When he could not guilt me into helping, he tried anger. He showed up at my apartment one evening looking frustrated and defeated at the same time. I remember opening the door and seeing him there with his jaw tight and his eyes tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I shook my head. "We can talk here," he exhaled sharply, like my boundary was an insult. Then he said, "Things are bad." I almost laughed, but I did not, because he was waiting for the moment I would soften. I said, "That sounds like a family problem." His face hardened. "You know what I mean." "No," I said calmly. "I know exactly what you mean. You want me to rescue you again." He looked away. That was his answer. I crossed my arms and waited. Then he finally said, "Mom is stressed. Mia is stressed. The house is a mess. The whole thing is falling apart." I nodded once. "Yes," I said. "That is what happens when one person is carrying everything and then stops." He blinked. Maybe he expected me to feel sorry for him. Maybe he expected me to rush back into the role they had assigned to me. But I had changed. So when I spoke, my voice was steady. "You had years to notice," I said. "Years to appreciate me. Years to act like I mattered even when I was helping. You did not. So no, Tyler. I am not fixing this." He stared at me for a second, like he was trying to find the old Claire underneath the calm voice and the closed door. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything. You always loved being the victim. I looked at him for a long moment, not with shock, with clarity, because there it was again. The same tactic. When they could not deny the truth, they attacked my character. When they could not hide the cruelty, they named my pain as drama. When they could not make me guilty, they tried to make me small. I nodded slowly. That, I said, is exactly why I am done. And I closed the door. That was the first time I ever closed a door on one of them without shaking afterward. I stood on the other side of it for a second, breathing hard. Then I walked away. That moment mattered more than I could explain. Because every time you choose yourself after being trained not to, something inside you changes. It does not happen all at once. It happens in small pieces. A conversation you refuse to continue. A bill you refuse to pay. A guilt trip you refuse to answer. A lie you refuse to cover. A role you refuse to play. And every time you refuse, the old version of you loses a little more power. Meanwhile, my family's situation kept getting worse. Not because I wished for their downfall, because truth has consequences. The mortgage was late again. The car payment had been missed. Tyler had borrowed from the wrong people and now owed money he did not have. Mia was losing patience because she had become used to living off stories instead of work. My mother, who had spent years pretending she was the one holding the family together, was now forced to face the fact that she had built her comfort on my exhaustion. That part hurt her the most. Not losing my help. Losing the illusion. People can survive hardship. What they often cannot survive is being seen clearly. And my family was being seen now. One be one. No makeup. No performance. No more pretending. The biggest turning point came about 2 months later. My aunt called me one afternoon and told me my mother wanted to meet in person. I did not answer right away. I thought about it for a while. Then I said yes, but I chose the place. A small coffee shop halfway between her house and mine. Public, neutral, safe. When I walked in, my mother was already there. She looked older than I remembered. Not just older in years, older in the face, like stress had finally carved truth into her features. She stood up when she saw me, then sat back down when I did not hug her. That tiny moment said a lot. She had expected warmth. She got distance. We sat across from each other for a few seconds without speaking. Then she said, "Thank you for coming." I nodded. She folded her hands around her cup. "I know I hurt you," she said. I stayed quiet, because that was only the beginning, and I had learned not to interrupt an apology before I knew whether it was real. She kept going. "I let things go on too long. I let your brothers and sister depend on you too much. I let myself get comfortable. And when you stopped, I reacted badly." I looked at her carefully. She was being more honest than she had ever been with me before. But honesty is not the same as transformation. So I waited. She swallowed and said, "I am ashamed." That word landed differently. Not because it fixed the past, because it sounded like something she had finally had to carry without my help. I asked, "Is that why you wanted to meet?" She looked down, then back up. "No," she said. "I wanted to ask if there is any way we can rebuild this." There it was. The real question. Not whether she had changed. Whether she could still have access to me. I leaned back slightly. "Rebuild what?" I asked. "The part where I pay and you smile? The part where I say yes and everyone calls me difficult if I don't? The part where I am useful but not respected?" Her eyes filled with tears. And maybe before, I would have softened at that. But I knew better now. Tears are not always proof of change. Sometimes they are just proof that consequences have finally arrived. She whispered, "I do not want to lose you." I looked at her for a long time, and when I answered, my voice was gentle, but firm. Then stop treating me like I only matter when I am carrying you. That sentence hung between us like a verdict. She cried quietly after that. Not dramatic, not loud. Just the kind of crying that comes when someone realizes they cannot undo years of damage with one meeting. I did not comfort her. That was another thing I had learned. You cannot heal a wound by reopening it. You can only acknowledge it and let it exist without sacrificing yourself inside it. We talked for a while after that. Not enough to call it reconciliation. Enough to call it truth. She admitted that she had gotten used to depending on me. She admitted that she had been embarrassed by how much the house relied on me. She admitted that instead of facing her own fear and shame, she had let pride turn into cruelty. That was the first honest conversation we had ever had. And it changed something in me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding. I saw her differently after that. Not as a monster. Not as a victim. As a flawed woman who had failed her children in ways she could no longer pretend away. That did not erase what she did, but it made the story more real. People are complicated. The ones who hurt you are not always evil in the way movies teach us. Sometimes they are weak. Sometimes they are selfish. Sometimes they are tired and afraid and immature and proud. And those things can hurt just as deeply as malice. After that meeting, she did not ask me for money. That surprised me. I thought maybe she would. Instead, she asked if I would at least come to Sunday dinner once a month. I told her I would think about it. And I did. For a long time. Because I had to ask myself a hard question. Could I be around them without becoming the old Claire again? Could I stand in the same room and keep my boundaries intact? Could I love them without volunteering to be their shield? The truth is, after the first wave of pain passed, I expected to feel victorious. I expected to feel lighter every single day. I expected one clean moment where everything inside me would finally click into place and I would never look back. But healing was not dramatic like that. Healing was quiet. Some days it looked like me sitting in my kitchen with coffee I bought only for myself, staring out the window and realizing no one was waiting for me to solve their problem. Some days it looked like me waking up at 2 a.m., with my heart racing because I had dreamed my phone was ringing with another family crisis. Some days it looked like me laughing at something small and then suddenly feeling guilty for being happy when my family had once depended on my sadness. That was the part nobody talks about. When you spend years being the responsible one, peace can feel like betrayal. At least, it did for me. I had spent so long being needed that I did not know how to exist without being used. That realization hurt more than I expected. Because once the noise stopped, I had to face the girl who had stayed too long. The girl who had confused survival with love. The girl who had thought if she gave enough she would finally be chosen. I remember one night in particular. It was raining outside. Not a storm. Just soft rain tapping against the glass. I had finished dinner, washed my plate, and sat down on my couch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. And for the first time in years, I was not worried about who needed a ride, who had no money, who had forgotten a bill, or who was about to call and make me feel guilty for saying no. It was just me. And in that silence, I cried. Not because I was broken. Because I was finally safe enough to feel what I had been holding back for years. I cried for every birthday I spent working instead of celebrating. I cried for every time I sent money while hiding my own stress. I cried for every joke they made at my expense and every time I smiled so no one would know I was hurting. I cried because I had loved them honestly, and they had used that honesty like a ladder. I cried because the people who should have protected me had instead trained me to become their shield. And once I finished crying, I felt something unexpected. Not weakness, release. That night changed me, because after that, I stopped asking why they did it. Not because I didn't care, because I finally understood that the answer would never make the pain smaller. They used me because they could. They mocked me because they thought I would stay quiet. They called me ungrateful because my silence had protected them for too long. That was the truth. Ugly, simple, and real. A few weeks later, I got a message from Mia. It was short, almost careful. She wrote, "I know I was horrible to you." I stared at that text for a long time, because those 7 words held a whole past inside them. I know I was horrible to you. Not I'm sorry. Not I take responsibility. Not I understand what I did. Just recognition. And even then, that was more honesty than I had gotten from her in years. I replied, "Yes, you were." A minute passed. Then another. Then she texted back, "I don't know how to fix it." That was the first time I believed she might actually mean something real. Because people who are lying usually know how to perform a solution. People who are truly ashamed often don't. I told her, "Start by not asking me to erase it." She didn't answer after that. But I didn't need her to, because I had stopped needing everyone else's approval to validate my pain. That was part of my growth. I did not need them to admit everything before I could move forward. I had already lived it. I had already survived it. And survival gave me something no apology ever could: perspective. I saw my family clearly now. My mother was not just cruel. She was frightened of losing control. Tyler was not just lazy. He was addicted to being rescued. Mia was not just mean. She had built her confidence on comparing herself to me. And me? I had been the one trying to carry all their broken pieces while pretending I was not bleeding. That did not make me a saint. It made me human. And finally, I let myself be human too. I started saying things I had never said before. I cannot do that. I am not available. That is not my responsibility. I'm sorry, but no. At first, those words felt sharp in my mouth. Then they started to feel clean, like washing old dirt off my hands, like opening a window in a room that had been closed for too long. My life slowly became my own. I decorated my apartment the way I wanted. I bought a lamp that made the room feel warm at night. I put fresh flowers on the table once because I simply liked them. I learned how to cook meals for one without turning it into a sad event. I even took myself out to dinner one evening and sat there alone, watching families and couples and friends laugh around me. And I did not feel left out. I felt proud, because I had once been the girl who could not imagine eating without being useful. Now I was the woman who could sit at a table by herself and feel whole. That was freedom. Not loud freedom. Not movie-style freedom. Real freedom. The kind that comes after you stop begging to be treated like a person. The kind that comes after years of emotional debt are finally paid back to yourself. Of course, my family still tried to test me. They always did. One holiday season, my mother called and invited me over like nothing had happened. Like I had not spent years feeding a system that punished me for helping. Like I had not stood in that coffee shop and asked for honesty. Like I had not closed a door on an old version of my life. I considered ignoring it. But I didn't. I answered and said, "I'll come for dinner, but only if we keep it peaceful." There was a pause. Then she said, "Of course." I knew that of course meant nothing, unless behavior matched it. Still, I went. And when I walked in, something felt different right away. No one rushed to ask me for money. No one made the usual little jokes. No one acted like I was being dramatic for arriving on time but not early enough to help with everything. That alone was progress. Dinner was awkward in the beginning. Everyone kept their eyes on their food. Tyler looked uncomfortable. Mia looked quieter than usual. My mother kept adjusting things on the table so she would not have to look at me too long. And then, halfway through the meal, my aunt said something that changed the whole atmosphere. She looked at my mother and said, "You know, I've been thinking about Claire a lot lately." No one moved. My mother froze slightly. My aunt continued, calm and steady. She carried too much for too long. Most people would have left earlier. Instead, she stayed and got treated like a burden for helping. That is not something to be brushed aside. I looked down at my plate, not because I was embarrassed, because I was touched. My aunt had no reason to defend me except that she believed the truth mattered. My mother's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not interrupt. And that mattered too. Maybe that was growth. Maybe that was the beginning of a different kind of family. Not perfect, not healed in one moment, but honest enough to begin again in smaller ways. After dinner, Tyler came outside while I was getting ready to leave. He stood beside my car and rubbed the back of his neck like he was uncomfortable in his own skin. "I know I was terrible," he said. I waited. He looked away. "I used to think you would never leave," he admitted. "I thought you'd always come back no matter what we said." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "That was your mistake." He nodded once. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. And for him, that was rare. Then he said, "I'm trying to do better." I studied his face. People say that kind of thing all the time. Some mean it. Some don't. What mattered to me was not the sentence. It was the direction. So I said, "Then keep trying when nobody claps for you." He gave a small, tired laugh. But I was serious. Because real change is not performed for applause. Real change happens when no one is watching. I drove home that night with a strange feeling in my chest. Not peace exactly. Not yet. But something close. Something softer. Something that said maybe the past would always matter, but it did not have to own me forever. That was the lesson my family taught me without meaning to. They showed me what happens when people mistake devotion for weakness. They showed me how easily gratitude can be turned into a leash. They showed me how fast a family can become a courtroom when someone finally refuses to keep paying for everyone else's comfort. But they also taught me something else. They taught me that no matter how long you have been carrying other people, the day you put the weight down is the day your life begins. And that is what happened to me. My life began the moment I stopped apologizing for existing. It began when I stopped funding disrespect. It began when I stopped pretending that love without dignity was enough. It began when I looked at my own reflection and finally saw someone worth protecting. Not because I was perfect, not because I had no regrets, but because I had given too much of myself away and still found the courage to come back home to who I was. So now, when I think about that old house, I do not think about the insults first. I think about the silence after the truth came out. I think about the look on their faces when they realized they had lost the one person who had kept everything from collapsing. I think about how the family exposed itself not through my anger but through my absence.